right, folks. So jumping into this end of season review, I'm first gonna go back to go forward. So I'm gonna go straight into the 21-22 season and to get into this and to get here. I'm only gonna spend a minute on it. So guys, do not worry that I'm gonna go through the whole background of Newcastle. Let me share this screen. So 21-22. So, and I want to be able to provide context. That's what this review is going to be about. That's why I'm doing this. I want to be able to provide context. So what's the context? We know in the first season, I won't have to go to it too long. In the first season of the takeover, we were with Steve Bruce. We were going 10 games, 15 games where we hadn't won, and we're going straight into we're looking at the barrel of the gun of relegation. Eddie Howe and the owners came in and managed to pull us out of the fire. In that time and in that year, we'd obviously bought Joe Willock over the summer, but we bought Bruno Gomes, we bought Chris Wood, Dan Burn, Kieran Trippier, and Matt Target. And those are the guys that help rescue us, not only rescue us from relegation, but we survived and thrived. We finished 11th after being bottom of the league that season. And we took that momentum into the next season, which was the 22 and 23 season. Now, nobody, including myself, could have really thought that we were going to finish in the Champions League spot as we did. And we also bought, obviously, Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon, both of whom really we haven't seen the fruits of until this year. Sven Botman, Matt Target became a permanent signing. Nick Pope has been fantastic for us. And so you can see even with those purchases there, with many of them, maybe a little bit lesser than Sven Botman, but particularly with Alexander Isak and Sven and Anthony Gordon, we didn't really see the fruits of those signings until this year. And obviously we finished in the Champions League, and a lot of that was to do obviously with just how good we were defensively and offensively. We conceded the top joint least goals in the league, and we scored plenty of goals. We were athletic, we were strong. Our strength was essentially just outrunning other teams, being more stronger than them essentially, and running them into the ground, and just being just overall hell for people to play with. People just started giving us the ball, and because there was no point in them having the ball because our counter press was just so good. So, and we also, and I'm going to use this as a caveat, we also drew 14 games that season. So yes, we finished 71 points, but there was also that kind of feeling for me anyway, going into the 23-24 season, which obviously is just finished. For me, there was that opportunity where if we drew 14 games going into this season, even if we half that this season, where we drew 7 and we won 3-4 more games and drew 3 more games, we could even add to the total points total of 71 points and could get even more. So going into this season, this is now adding context and my expectations into this season was, I said, you know what, with the momentum that we got from last season and with the transfer window that we had, as I was showing right now, this is before obviously everything we knew about a few other things, but I thought we could do well. Added to the fact, what I factored in was the momentum we had, the transfer window we had, but also the fact this is our first season in 20 years being in Europe, not only Europe, but Champions League Europe. And so I gave the team an expectation between 65 points to 80 points in terms of what could be achieved, 65 points being the baseline, because I thought, okay, got to factor in that we're going to get fatigued from all this traveling in Europe, and I also had expectations that we'd probably go quite far in the domestic cups, because since Eddie Howe and the owners take those domestic cups really seriously. So I thought semi-finals and onwards will go deep into those competitions. And so I had to factor that in, and I said, you know what, the deeper we go into those competitions, you've got to factor in injuries, and no one could have predicted would have had this level of injuries, which I think we're going to speak a little bit more about. So I had that expectation of between 65 to 80 points possibly big dreams there in terms of 80 points, but I thought, why not? And we could hopefully get through the for the first group stage. Obviously, in that transfer window, we bought Sandro Tonali, who was our ceiling raiser. Harvey Barnes again, who I think is better than Maxi in terms of end product and quality. Some people might not like it, but it's just the stats prove it. Tino Livramento, one for the future. Lewis Hall again for the future. Again, Tino kind of being that successor to Kieran Trippier. I thought we could really step on this season and move and achieve some greatness. Unfortunately, I think obviously that hasn't come to fruition in terms of what we would have hoped to we could have hoped to achieve. And I think, as Eddie Howe said it, there's a lot of frustration towards that, because I don't think it's because of lack of effort. I do think obviously the injuries played a huge role in it. And for instance, in the previous season, we had some of the least amount of injuries, and we had in fact our squad was the least rotated. So we pretty much played the same 11. And why do we play the same 11? Because we didn't have that many injuries. Whereas this season, we're the most rotated squad, we have the most injuries, and especially from December onwards of this season, and combining that with the going into Europe and the Champions League, it really our numbers, our play numbers really went down, and they left Howe very limited choices in terms of the personnel he could bring on. And so that hurt our league form, that hurt our domestic cup form. We obviously finished in 2 quarterfinals, and also that hurt us in terms of being able to qualify from the group of death in the Champions Leagues. But again, all those kind of, if you want to call it failings, I don't think it's because of the quality of the overall squad. I think it's the injuries and the suspensions that really hurt us. Because as you can see from today, for instance, and other times when Howe does have his squad, has his team, he picks the right team. The tactics usually are pretty good, and we do well. And what is it about this season? So going into this season, and kind of looking at some of the stats, and I'll go into the main one really, and this is going to be in a nutshell really. Newcastle United, in terms of, again, this is FOTMob, so the overall FOTMob ratings that we're fifth, in terms of our performances. So we performed pretty well this season. I know there's been some shockers, but we performed pretty well this season, and it's and obviously we've been unlucky in some games. Fourth in terms of this, and this is the one. I'm only going to go into these two sticks. That's going to make sense for you. Goals per match, 2.2, fourth in the league for that. However, goals conceded per match for Newcastle, 1.6. That we're 10th for that. And where do we find ourselves in terms of the league table? Right bang in the middle. We are 7th in the league. So what can we say? We're top 5, top 6 in terms of big chances created, goals scored, goals conversions, all those type of things. And again, we're like mid-table or lower mid-table in terms of anything defensively, or in terms of goals conceded. We were at one point really low in terms of our possessions won in the final third, especially when we didn't have the strength of our midfield up. But we rose up about a couple of places since that time. And I mentioned the third in terms of possession won in the final third, because that's one of our key attributes as a team. And if I look into some really interesting stats, I'll get you guys over onto whoscored.com, another fantastic site. So this is Newcastle. Again, going to the goals scored and goals conceded. Newcastle overall in open play had scored 39 goals. From open play, we conceded 39 goals, 12 from set pieces, 6 from counter attacks, 4 from penalty. Is it conceded? Yeah, against, and 4 from penalties and 1 own goal. So we conceded overall about, 49, 51, 57, 63, 64 goals we conceded. At home, we conceded only 22 goals. Our home form is imperious. And again, that goes now from personnel to possibly a mentality shift, and how the strength of the crowd really helped the team. And so At home, we conceded only 22 goals. That's fantastic. However, away from home, we conceded 36, 39, 40, 41 goals. And there's a lot of things that go into that. People are talking about the mentality of the squad. Even Eddie Howe did talk about how the nastiness of the squad is to do with the personnel. When he alluded to your Joe Lintons, your Popes, your Bruno Gomes, if you don't have those guys, or even if a couple of those guys are missing, it really impacts how the team play. I would also add the fact that a lot of the times when we were playing away, especially in the midsection, in the middle part of the season, when we were traveling to Europe, and also was probably the height of our injuries as well, we'd often go to away games. And that's when we lost, for instance, against Luton, against Nottingham Forest, all those type of games. Nottingham Forest was a home as well, but was a home game. But in those other games, we really, really hurt ourselves. And that's been the kind of, I think, the frustration for Howe and others, knowing that we could have, for instance, done better in the league, especially away, had we had certain players about. We could have possibly gone through that group stage in the Champions League. We would have beaten Chelsea in the League Cup quarter-final, possibly find us in the final, had we had our personnel. And obviously, we lost out to Man City in the FA Cup, which is nothing at the Etihad, which you can take on the chin, even with your full strength squad. And so I think that's the frustration I think this team is facing. And then if you go for goals scored at home overall for Newcastle, we've scored more goals than the entertainers, which is an incredible achievement. 52 goals from open play, brilliant. 15 goals from set pieces, 8 from counter-attacks, 8 from penalties. 6 of those penalties we got for Anthony Gordon as well, just a note, and 2 on goal. So that's like, what's that, 62, 67, 75, 83, 89 goals scored this season. I think that's 89. You guys can correct me. Fantastic overall. That's brilliant. And then at home, again, incredible amount of goals, 29 from open play, 7 from counter-attack, 7 from penalties, 5 from... And, brilliant. That's like what, 36, 40, 30, 43, 48, 49 goals at home. Brilliant. Away, a little bit less, 33, 36 goals scored away from home. So it's a combination of this season. I think it's a real mixed bag. If you look at Newcastle's chance creations, goals scored, going forward, fantastic. If you look at the amount of goals that we concede, especially away from home, atrocious. Our home form, imperious. Our away form, troubling at best. And I think that does boil down to, at times, a lot of it is down to the personnel that we've had available. And that's kind of not only affected the ability and quality of the squad, that possibly also the mentality of the squad. Now, some folks would say tactically we could have made some amendments and adjustments, but some of the solutions I've heard to that haven't been that great. And so I'm not fully convinced that Eddie Howe could have done much when he's got 10 to 13 players missing at one time. So I'm going to look at, in terms of the individual players who have been my kind of outstanding players and players to look at. In terms of outstanding players for me, has been Anthony Gordon, has been Bruno Gomes, it has been Alexander Isak. And for me, especially in terms of Bruno and Anthony Gordon, they're very much neck and neck in terms of what they have been able to achieve this season. In terms of Anthony Gordon's been available throughout the season. I think 11 goals, 10 assists. He scored a lot of his, he scored against all the top 6 teams. So he's always showed up in the big matches, in the crunch matches when you need him. Same with Bruno Gomes. With the absence of Joe Linton, the absence of Sandro Tonali, and an injured Sean Longstaff, but still playing, a 17-year-old Lewis Miley beside him for a lot of part of the season. Bruno Gomes absolutely held the fort for us and played it massively well for us. So those guys have been absolutely fantastic for us. I think there was if I can find it on here, if you look at the squad, this in terms of, if you guys can see it, can you guys see on this side? Yeah, to the right, if you can see the squad, Bruno's got himself 8 goals, 7 assists. Anthony Gordon is not on here due to injuries. Obviously, got 11 goals and 10 assists. It's been absolutely fantastic. And Alexander Isak, 2 assists, have a fantastic assist today against Brentford, 21 goals. He's had an exceptional year, and I mentioned him obviously in the previous season. I can't remember what his stats were, but it was a lot less than this. And so, in terms of the players who bought last season, are beginning to really bore fruit this season, especially in Anthony Gordon and in Alexander Isak. And so that goes back to where I started off the show in terms of how far Newcastle have gone. That a lot of the transfers that we've made, for instance, in Tino Livramento, in Lewis Hall, Sandro Tonali especially, we're not going to see those fruits until the season, next season coming. And I think going back to obviously the performers, the unsung heroes for me has been Sean Longstaff in terms of playing through injury. And I know there's a lot of controversy around his name. Sometimes his decision making isn't great. His technical ability could be better, but I don't ask a fish to fly. And there's things that he's aren't good at, and he knows that. As we saw the documentary Newcastle United, where he said, all I have to do, this is last year, all I have to do is get the ball, and he makes me look good, to my Bruno Guimaraes. All I have to do is get the ball and pass it to Bruno Guimaraes. Now, this season, that's totally changed, where he's had to do a lot more technically because of the players that have been missing. And if you guys remember, in the early part of the season, when we had Bruno, Joelinton, and Tonali playing, we were still losing games because a big part of that was Tonali was still adjusting to the team. However, when Sean Longstaff stepped in and we had Joelinton and Bruno, that midfield looked a lot more solid because of his ability to keep possession, look after Bruno, protect Bruno, and also Joelinton, and let those guys do their thing. And it solidified our squad. So unsung hero, I also include Dan Burn in that, who we know there's been epic highlight reels of him getting absolutely spun by wingers this season, but he's held his own, he's been resolute. Eddie Howe's kept him in. Primarily, I believe, not only for his leadership, but also his ability in terms of set pieces and protecting that and kind of that defensive work. Again, big controversy around Dan Burn, but he loves Newcastle United, in my opinion. I know when I'm praising these players, Longstaff and Dan Burn, I'm not saying that these guys are going to be the guys that are going to win us the Premier League, but I do think that these are the guys that you rely on, especially in the tough times. And hence why they're the unsung heroes. And they've been absolutely brilliant for us. We also have obviously hopes for the future. Lewis Hall, who I said mid-season, you guys can go back and check the video. I didn't see much hope for him. He wasn't getting played. I didn't know if he's going to really progress and do well. He's totally changed my mind. His technical ability, his awareness. You can see Bruno absolutely loves playing with him, the way he trusts him with the ball. He's been absolutely fantastic. So there's real hope for the future in Lewis Hall and Valentin Livramento. Lewis Miley has been absolutely fantastic for me. He's my young player of the season, just over Lewis Hall because of some of his heroics. And so there's a lot of hopes for the future. Now, looking at this man, Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe, I have a strong bias towards Eddie Howe because of the way he's come through in terms of his career. He's come from the school of hard knocks, in my opinion, with the way he started, the way he's taken Bournemouth to, and where he's literally being their coach, their sporting director, the guy who picks the cones, the guy who does the scouting, him and Jason Tyndall. And so I have a strong bias in seeing the little guy, the guy that's come from the school of hard knocks, who started from the bottom and has made his way to the top. I have a strong kind of bias towards him and wanting to see him succeed. And so that's why, and when there's a lot of doubt around his name, when people say, can he manage the big players? Is he ever going to win anything? Do Newcastle need that elite manager and to take them over the line, I'm always rooting for him. However, I also have to be careful not to allow my biases to blind me in terms of understanding whether Eddie Howe is the man to take us over. And so I'm always willing to listen to arguments as to why he may not be the guy. However, this season, my feeling is that in terms of um, our overall gameplay, in terms of like when we have players available, I love our style of football. I love the fact that we score so many goals. I think if we had more players available, fit players available, Sven Botman, even Jamal Lascelles, Kieran Trippier for long parts as well, Matt Target, and Joe Linton, Joe Willock, we would have conceded a lot less games. We would have a lot less goals, and would have, I think, done a lot better away from home as well. So it's not to say that isn't Eddie Howe's fault. People obviously accuse him of having his favorite players. People obviously accuse him of also being at times too tactically naive. But again, like I said, some of the solutions that people have offered up in terms of what he could have done different, to me, don't guarantee that we would have conceded less goals and won more away games. And so when Eddie Howe does have his players available, I believe he most of the time he uses them well. The main disappointing games for me this season, I think he's alluded to this because he said that he even said in the press conference in the press conference when we played Bournemouth, he said that we could there's at least 10 to 12 points that we could have done better in. And if I can talk about, I'll include Chelsea away, not being able to beat Luton this season, losing to Nottingham Forest at home 3-0. And there's another game that skipped my mind where we could have, and Luton, no, there's another game, and Man United. I'll include Man United in that. But that was a frustrating game. The last game, the second to last game of the season, we could have done better in those occasions. And we had our not full team, but we had players on the bench. Your Callum Wilsons were available. All those guys were available. And that's where you find disappointment. And it goes back to, again, when we drew 14 games, now to this season, we've had so many injuries. And also, obviously, but also the fact that there were games that we could have done better. There's this potential that Newcastle have had, and I don't think we've hit our ceiling. I don't think Eddie Howe has hit his ceiling, and so I still think that he's the guy, the man to take us into next season, and to. I do believe that he can win competitions for us. I do believe he can win the domestic competitions for us and get us into a higher position this season, that we can progress from this as well. I do score Eddie Howe probably in terms of overall season, managing the team through crisis, managing the squad, doing the best he can, bringing through players, seeing how Lewis Hall has developed, Livramento has developed, Miley has developed, and coping with the injuries, and also I'll also kind of score him in terms of taking into account, like I said, the 10 to 12 points that we could have got. I give Eddie Howe is somewhere between. I'll give him a B minus. I give him a B minus. It's between a C plus and a B minus. I give him a B minus. We are in 7th. We've got the 60 points. Hopefully, Man United get crushed and we get the Conference League. We're 11 points off last season. And like I said, there's factors for that. I give Eddie Howe a B minus, and I give the team overall probably a B plus, because we've never down tools. Has there been games that we could have done better, that we've been flat? Yes. A lot of those games, in my view, I attribute to the fact that we've had so many injuries and lack of squad rotation. First time in Europe for 20 years. All those things. That's why it's so important that we're in Europe again this season. It doesn't matter which competition. We've got to get used to that travel. We've got to get used to that. And playing 3-4 days after landing and stuff like that. We've got to keep doing that. We did finish in 2 quarterfinals this season as well, which is not bad. I would have wanted a little bit more, especially in the Chelsea game. So I've given the squad, I've given the team Newcastle United B in terms of just overall rating and how they're doing, and Eddie Howe B minus in terms of his kind of performance as well. Like he said, he's 10, 12 points off, and I agree with him. And that leaves that ceiling that people are talking about. I don't think he knows how good he can be. I know he knows his qualities, but I don't think he yet knows what he can achieve. So overall, I leave this. Let me take that. Overall, look, I'm just I guess, frustrated in terms of the season about what could have been, in terms of what we could have achieved. I think we could have at least been 5, 10 points better off. And I think we could have at least gone through the group stages of the Champions League. I think we could have beaten Chelsea in the League Cup and got at least to the semi-final, possibly final stages, because I think semi-final were Leeds. We could have got to that final. But at the same time, who could account for the suspensions to Tonali, the 10, like up to 13, 14 injuries at some point at peak heights. And so I give that leeway, and it also gives me space for a lot of hope and potential about what we can achieve next season should we reduce our injuries by 34 to 40%, and also seeing the players that we bought this season getting better, even going to the season forward. So a lot to play for. I still see the fact that Newcastle are progressing. I think we're in that process of consolidation, and I think we're going to see that consolidation, especially coming into the next season. I think the owners, the background room staff, especially the medical staff and everybody else, are going to learn. I would have learned a lot of lessons, I hope, and put them into practice. So I'm really, really looking forward into next season. I do think Newcastle on that projection is obviously is always up and down. It's never a straight line, but I still think we're moving forward, that we're doing well. And so, yeah, I'm overall, I'm frustrated with the season, but I'm also content with where we finished, and I'm hopeful to where we could be as well. But let me know what you guys' thoughts were. Who are your key players? How do you rate the season? How do you rate Eddie Howe? And what are your hopes for the future? Let me know. Send in your comments. And until next time, folks, take care. God bless. Look out. I've got more materials for coming in for transfer. I'm going to be my transfer windows throughout the 6 weeks. 6 weeks throughout the kind of break and stuff like that. So do look out for it. But until next time, guys, take care. And God bless, folks.